Well, hello there, and welcome to yet another episode of Merge Roundtable. I'm here this week with Jim Durbin and Mark Shutt. We're going to be talking about a variety of interesting topics. We are going to talk a little bit about some the Coinbase Uniswap legal proceedings. We're going to be talking about the Grayscale ETF, potentially landmark case, whatever we're going to call that. X, I'm still not used to calling it X. X announced some new features this week and some new plans. We're going to talk a little bit about that, and we're going to talk about measuring developer productivity. This is an interesting niche little topic, but I think there's some meat here. So we'll talk about all that stuff, but you got to stick around after this to hear it all. So how's it going, gentlemen?
Pretty good.
Good week. Yeah.
Good week.
Yeah.
Been a long weekend. Ready for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think there's just been a lot of I think we'll start with the crypto side because there's been a lot of courtroom crypto action this week and some stuff that you got real excited about, Mark, that occurred. You know me, I'm jaded about this ETF business. But you and Lee came in here and recorded some stuff about the Grayscale decision.
Yeah, so Grayscale has won their lawsuit against the SEC, and basically the lawsuit was against Grayscale, and the SEC has decided that they have not violated any rights and that the SEC must review their ETF application once again. So we're still waiting for these applications to actually be approved. I don't think anyone has gotten approved ever, right?
No. They've gotten futures approved, and there's been ETFs in like Canada that got approved, but no American ETFs have been approved.
Yeah, so it was an interesting week for the market. We saw all of the crypto market kind of go up after this news. It was very exciting. People got very hyped up about it, and in my opinion, this decision by the judges was one that is to be, looked upon in a positive way. I do think, it's going to set a precedence for what's going to come with ETFs, but there's still a lot of room to go. And the markets are kind of back to where they were before this news. So we'll see what happens. And I do believe the Bitcoin ETFs will get approved eventually, hopefully this year.
The crypto law analysts that I pay attention to were actually kind of wondering whether or not Gensler is going to, and this is their quote, adhere to the rule of law when it comes to these rulings, because they've basically been a rogue organization when it comes to crypto for a couple administrations now.
And the question is who is Gary Gensler really working for? Is he working for the SEC? Is he working for the White House? Is he working for some sort of party that we may not be aware of? That is the real question on the table here. And he taught a class at MIT on Bitcoin.
Right.
And now all of a sudden he's a Bitcoin hater. It kind of doesn't add up. So it's interesting. What is his agenda behind this? And could it be one that a higher power has a role in? And if they do have a role in, what is their interest in the crypto landscape? Is it to control people? Is it to control the industry? Is it to kind of turn crypto around from being a decentralized system into something that is more centralized where they could control? So I don't know.
I mean, it does fit in with the whole choke point 2.0 timeline, right? I mean, this is like a multi-year campaign to put the brakes on crypto and to apply a chilling effect to crypto market participants.
And what's really interesting is like the attitude from the SEC and from Gensler himself has kind of evolved a lot more aggressively than it used to be, right? There was always kind of this overarching ruling for crypto that we're going to try to control it, but now more than ever, it seems like they're really trying to put their hands in the bag. So
yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's a house of cards. if you look at the attitudes within the SEC, there is 2 commissioners, not just Hester Pierce, but 2 commissioners that issued dissenting rulings on SEC opinions with regard to crypto in most recent cases.
Well, it's not only commissioners; it's also representatives of the House, of the Senate.
Well, sure, but I'm talking within the organization, the SEC itself, which actually we started talking about it before the show, and you paused me.
Yeah,
because Vivek. I always mess
Ramaswamy.
up Ramaswamy. I always like put extra consonants in there. Was on the campaign trail talking about amongst the many federal organizations he wants to dissolve is the SEC, includes the SEC, which if he wasn't so reactionary and weird about like his other politics might actually make me wish I had the right to vote.
yeah. I don't know too much about Vivek, but that's funny. I hope people got that one.
Yeah.
I don't know too much about Vivek, but he's obviously a businessman, and if he can come in and kind of help businesses and help the crypto industry as a whole, then I see that as a positive.
Yeah, so like the list of organizations he wants to kill off include the SEC, the IRS,
The educational
Department of
department, yeah.
Education.
Yeah, it's been
Yeah,
everybody wants to fill that off.
the Republicans and Libertarians have been talking about that.
It's not
for
that old. They
30
only, what, did it
years.
in the 70s?
Yeah, but since it started, they've been talking about killing it off. But
Yeah.
he wants to, I mean, gut the federal government, but he also is saying all the reactionary things that the Trump administration was saying during their campaign, but to the right of even Trump,
Right.
with regard to things like immigration and whatnot. So it makes him a hard candidate to really get behind if you know anybody with skin lighter than mine. You know, it's just kind of a weird guy to get behind. But like I said, you know, the fact that he's a populist guy, and the populist guy is supporting ending the SEC, as are a cadre of voices in Congress, like you mentioned.
Yeah, Vivek also supports Bitcoin. Like I think he has the same campaign on Bitcoin as RFK,
yeah.
for sure. So
I feel like he likes all the things.
That's the thing, right? So this is what
they're politicians. They're supposed to like everything.
This was specifically documented in the New York Times, so take that for what it's worth. But the guy that they assigned to follow the Vivek campaign has been following him from stop to stop. He was in Chicago, and apparently, you know, Texas has been shipping off immigrants to other states or whatever, and
Right.
a lot of them are being settled in Chicago. And so there was a group of people in some of the neighborhoods that were upset about that. Vivek said, "Okay, this is a great way for me to campaign my campaign border, you know, thoughts on this." And then when he got there, they held his feet to the fire about his positions on ending affirmative action, right? Kind of expected behavior in Chicago. But then he goes to the next stop on his campaign trail and says, "Oh yes, they love me in Chicago. They completely support my position." I mean, like, that just completely says whatever. He's like true populist, like no relationship with what actually occurred, according to this New York Times reporter.
So he's a politician.
I'm
Yeah,
not
yeah.
surprised.
Here,
Yeah.
what?
Well, what I'm saying is we get excited about politicians like RFK and Vivek that come out and appear to support.
Who gets excited about politicians? Is that still a thing?
Who gets excited about politics?
I mean, have you been on Twitter or X?
I mean, granted, most of America still believes that the government can do no wrong.
That's not true at all.
Well, they believe that they believe that
I
if
think
you
that's
elect my party, if you elect the party that I like,
Right.
it'll all be okay.
They only like the government if it's about winning. It's like saying I like
sports.
my team when they're winning. Otherwise, I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
See, so my work is in politics, and from my understanding, from what I'm doing, I've been told multiple times that about 50 to 60% of the country still believes that there's not really any corruption within the political system or within the U.S.
Those
government.
numbers have been cratering.
I hope.
Since the 1960s.
I
They're
hope.
so low now. I don't know who's telling you 50, 60%.
Is
That's
it the
like
politician saying
No,
that?
no.
that's not even if you're going to believe any of them. No. Every institution has been falling for my entire adult life. So what happened is a little history lesson for you, right?
Please.
So the Great Depression happened, and smart people couldn't leave their homes anymore because they couldn't go to the cities for jobs. So they tended to stay. So what happened was a lot of the boomers and a lot of the silent generation ended up taking jobs like postmaster, driving a bus in town, running a local store. So, and eventually getting into government. So they grew up at a time where smart, competent people who were local were involved in politics.
Mhm.
And then the 70s, 60s, 70s, and 80s started coming along, and the government got a lot bigger. There's a lot more term for graft and corruption. And all of a sudden, we have this assumption that government was good because the boomers and people older said that it was themselves that were in it. That number has been falling because now we don't trust the military. We don't trust the clergy. We don't trust the schools. We don't trust politicians. Those numbers have been creating. They're down at like 10%. So if somebody's, and the idea that they don't think it's corruption, that doesn't make any sense. That's one of those
Couldn't
things.
agree more.
It's like when someone says Congress is so terrible, we should throw them out, but I'm going to vote for my guy because he's been in there 65 years. So there's a difference between actions and what they're reporting. But that 50, 60%, I think everybody knows things that they're so corrupt now that they realize the government's out for itself. And that's why they're disengaging, which is one of the dangers. What happens when you stop being engaged? Because if you don't get engaged in politics, you end up victim of the people who do. And the people who do were the ones that you hated in high school. They're the folks that we see, Pete Buttigieg and Vivek Ramaswamy.
Right.
They're all social climbers.
So
I mean,
why is this such a big issue in the country if everybody is aware, if 90% of the country, to your statistics, are aware that the country and the government is corrupt? Why is it such a big problem still?
other people's problems. It's that's from, what is it? Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Mm-hmm.
Let's dig into something and see if I can get arrested for the J6 stuff. If there was a corrupt election,
Mhm.
if there was some cabal at the top doing horrible things and you absolutely 100% knew it and could prove it, you have to go do something. It's almost terrifying to think about. Oh my God, what if the government really is run by space aliens? Well, now that you have something to do, it's a lot easier to go, yeah, they're probably bad, but I'm going to go watch The Bachelor. So if you are really confronted with something, you were responsible for it. So it's just easier to just chatter about whatever came up on the news, but let it go. It is hard to get into politics. It's not easy. Understanding something as simple as city council or county or state takes years to really understand the players, to get through the propaganda, understand the media things, to realize the funding and how things work. On a national level, it's almost impossible. So people don't have time to do that. And then they have something. That was the Tea Party movement and then the Occupy. What happens is basically a bunch of Gen Xers got old enough to start caring about politics and they all jumped in. And then they're all hopeful. We're going to make a difference. It's going to change. And then ultimately it goes right back to what it always was.
Yeah.
So it could just be there's a time right now. There's something big coming. I don't care if you believe in the fourth turning or not, but people are aware. And someone like
the fourth turning,
the generational Strauss and House, he says every 4 generations. So that was the whole idea of the boomers, the millennials, oh my God, I skipped the Gen X myself. I've been so propagandized.
Your own generation.
I forgot my own generation.
Self-hating Gen Xer.
They think something big comes every 80 years.
every
So, like,
80 years.
Revolutionary War, Civil War, World War II, and then what's that? Well, we're right at the next day, 80 years. So 4 generations, there's a big thing, and then all the corruption swept away, and it's like cleaning the horse stables,
Purging the bad.
And something new happens. Something new comes from it. And you have a brand new way of looking at things. I think that's clear. Just look at BRICS, and you think we're not going to live in a unipolar world where the U.S. dollar is almighty. We're actually smaller than BRICS at this point. You guys realize that the West is smaller than BRICS? We have less GDP.
Less GDP than BRICS.
That should be terrifying, and they've just kind of.
Well, it's terrifying if you are a supporter of Federal Reserve banking, right? Because what that means is, what the reason why that the United States, from a policy perspective, opposes BRICS is not because of like we just really want to win the dollar game or whatever. It's because when you inflate the dollar, when you quadruple the money supply as we did over the last 3 years, happened over a span of 6 months.
It was the best inflation of all time. It was a great inflation. Everybody loved it. You're gonna see.
You're socializing that drop in value across the entire population that uses that dollar. Now, in most countries, you're just socializing that loss across your whole population. But the United States, because it's the reserve currency for the world, socializes that loss across all the countries that use the dollar as a backing
Right.
for
We
its thing.
push our inflation globally.
Well, it's a power thing, right?
Yeah,
'Cause if you
petrodollars.
have that kind of power where you can just affect the economy of any country that uses your currency, then it all goes back to power.
Well, it's not. I mean, but it's about power is an aspect of it, but you don't want power for the sake of having power. We're basically from a banking perspective colonializing the world, right? We don't have to have a standing military in every small country in the world as long as we have them under a thumb where they can use our dollar, and then we issue a tax to them by inflating our dollar, and then they have to do more work so that we can get the benefits of it. So
It's not a bad system if it's yours.
yeah, it's not a bad system if it's yours, but it's about to belong to Russia and China and the rest of the BRICS member nations. And to the extent that we are now probably going to only be socializing those losses on a third or a quarter of the world's population, not basically all of it.
Inflation will go through the roof, basically, because you can't continue to overspend if you can't push that inflation overseas.
Right.
So what do you guys foresee the next 6 to 12 months looking like in terms of the monetary system, the economy, and the role of cryptocurrency in this conversation?
Well, there you go. I don't.
I think you need a longer timeline than that.
Yeah.
I mean, 6 to 12, you're just guessing. Ultimately, we're going to have to deal with the debt in some way or another. They're either going to turn it into some central banking coin, which you've talked about. They don't have the ability to do.
No. They can't even launch a healthcare.gov.
Typically, you have war, famine, genocide. I mean, that's usually how you deal with that historically. It doesn't matter if it's the Roman Empire or if it's the Mayans or anywhere else.
Are you a historian?
Yes.
I didn't know that about you.
Yeah, I mean, I trained as one. It's not went to school for it and read books. But yes, I mean, this is the scary part when you realize this has all happened before. It happens again, and something that can't go on forever won't. But I thought that 20 years ago. So you can't make predictions because you never know what's going to happen. We could get an energy source that comes in like cold fusion that would absolutely transform everything. So it's always a race of time between massive entropy and some kind of win. But yeah, we need big energy, and we need to solve some of the problems, and we need to figure out how we can decentralize the currency. But long term, it's good. It's good when massive structures begin to collapse. There's a lot of money to be made. You end up focusing on things that matter. You put more time into your kids. I mean, it doesn't have to be bad. What's bad is when you hold on to something that cannot work anymore, and you just keep trying it, pumping more money in, and then you start accusing. You start indicting your political opponents.
Think about it.
Huge problem.
Think about it from like an enterprise or a business perspective, right? Like, essentially, the government has a monopoly on being the government.
Oh.
So, what if IBM had a monopoly on being a tech company? That means we wouldn't get a Google or a Yahoo or all the successful or failed tech startups that exist because IBM is just working on being a better IBM. Whereas I think we're headed towards, and you can say if you agree or disagree with your historical perspective, where massive superpowers are going to start having competition. And
maybe that's a good thing.
Like a balkanization of superpowers. Yeah, no, I think it absolutely is a good thing. Competition is always good because it makes things that wouldn't have to compete better normally. With things that wouldn't normally have to compete makes them better. I mean, IBM is better because it has to compete against like 5 other enterprise technology companies and a whole host of startups that come up from Silicon Valley.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to agree with that. This goes back to our libertarian argument. I think that when dying superpowers or when people in charge lose what they have, they tend to tear everything down. I think that's what ends up happening. So whether it's a financial structure or whether it's a war of some kind, or I really don't see. I think the world remakes itself. I think it's already starting to. We had 3 coups in Africa that the U.S. was not prepared for. Like Newland was over there and like, what just happened? And then we give $100 million and then Gabon takes over. I mean, it's the world is bursting at the seams. And the argument from the West for the longest time was that the world's a dangerous place. There's really bad people out there, and we're the only one. We're the world's policemen. We're the only one stopping them. The problem is now we have all this history behind us, and you know who we are. You're like, well, we do seem to have a lot of troops in other places. We we cause a lot of problem. You look at Libya and Syria. We've not been, we poke a lot of governments. We've always did. We did in the 60s, we did in the 50s.
I mean, ever since World War II, right? It seems like the U.S.
We finally got involved. The Britain's been doing it for 300 years. So everybody, this is just what nations do. They mess with each other. The problem is we have things like AI, and we have what was it, the tick shortage? You guys hear about the tick thing up in Virginia? The Lone Star tick. Apparently, if it bites you, you get a red meat allergy.
Oh yeah.
The CDC is reporting on this, which CDC, but
my favorite.
That's terrifying. I'm not going to Virginia because I can never have a hamburger again. Because now the question, now that we know it, is okay. Are they reporting it? Are they putting something into our water? Did they release some type of tick that's out there so that we don't eat meat so they can save the planet from climate change?
Oh my!
I mean, that sounds ridiculous, and you're like, okay. The only way I'm not going to believe it is if the government comes out and says they did do that. I'm like, okay. It's like I believed in aliens, now I don't because they said they were real. You're like, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Now
pretty
I'm
crazy.
woke.
Yeah. You're like, wait a minute, this is a crazy thing, but you never know what they're going to do. And there's with biological, bacterial warfare, AI, there's so many things that a struggling actor can do to mess with you. Not just blowing up a production refinery and messing with oil, but shutting down EBT. There's all kinds of things in a big, massive society that can fail. And we're not very
but my point is why
too fragile.
So the whole IBM and competition thing that you disagree with, you don't think it's, I mean, because really what we're talking about, and the reason why we're talking about this topic in the first place, is the death of the dollar. You don't think that it's better that something like Bitcoin or cryptocurrency could rise up and take its place?
Oh, absolutely. I think that. And I think companies competing. I think governments competing. I don't think people realize because governments have a monopoly on violence.
Sure, but but if you don't have a monopoly on money, your ability to have a monopoly on violence is greatly degraded.
If you don't have a monopoly on money,
right?
Well, it means your violence is worse because it's like a cornered animal.
Well, no, I mean, not to reduce it to a fictional cartoon, but like the Rick and Morty thing, I'm going to defeat your government by changing $1 to $0, and then like, how are you going to pay your military that you're ravaging the planet with? You know.
Right.
Well, that's the thing, though. You don't need large militaries now. You can just mess with people.
Sure,
in a very terrifying way.
But that's not limited to government.
And that's a different story too. But government tends to do it because it's about power and it's about money and it's about violence. But a random terrorist doing it, a random person.
But this is we're talking about, like, you asked the question, what's the next 12 months? And you said we got to look further than that. Looking further than that is that governments, without the power of the bank roll, are not going to have monopoly on violence. They're not going to have a monopoly on power, because anybody can bankroll anything with the ability to create value and measure value with blockchain, right? Like you're no longer limited to a central bank dictating by fiat.
Because
what happens when that currency becomes controlled by a bigger party, like let's say BlackRock or a government? Well, BlackRock owns 4 of the 5. They are the second largest shareholder in 4 of the 5 top Bitcoin mining companies. The number 1 company being Riot Platforms. They own about 6% of Riot Platforms.
I mean, that's fine. I mean, but also BlackRock is not a monolithic organization making decisions either. They're just.
But are they? Because sometimes it seems like they are the ones making the decisions.
It's not like
Biden's definitely
it's not like the Wizard of
decisions.
Oz situation. Like it's a hedge fund that's trying to make the best financial decisions.
Once a company gets big enough,
say it's more than that.
Yeah, but once a company gets big enough, it's the same thing as the government. There is no CIA. There's no Democratic Party. There are factions within each that utilize each other.
Right.
So even inside of large companies, it's not one driven vision. It is a bunch of people jockeying, and then media or someone on the outside will go, "Oh, this is the new bad guy." Because what was it before BlackRock was the bad one? It was
Halliburton.
Halliburton was the great evil that was driving everything on the rail. Then of course Lockheed and
I
mean, there's always some big baddie that's out. AT&T at one point. Oh, we're going to break them up and we're going to make them put Sprint in their own lobby. Mm-hmm. So there's always a big bad guy out there, but it's not. That's the mistake. Nothing's monolithic. It all has to do with centers of power. In fact, that's how you generate power: is you bring centers together and you harness those people towards something. So
what happens when the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing?
That's ideal. That's ideal.
Within the same organization.
Yeah,
that's ideal.
Absolutely. That's ideal.
Thing.
Yeah. You don't want power to be centralized.
Yeah.
You want people acting in their own self-interest inside of a system with proper incentives that the whole thing survives. That's really what you want.
That reminds me of something.
Right. You want Byzantine fault tolerance
Yeah.
in everything, right? That's ideal society. That's utopian society.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's cool. We went off a big rabbit trail
yeah.
there.
That was awesome.
Yeah.
Solve the world's
We
problems.
managed to not fall down the conspiracy hole,
Yeah.
Oh,
but
dude,
talk about the fact that we knew some, but we didn't fall down it.
There we
I would
go.
love to talk about conspiracies.
Yeah,
anytime.
don't get Mark started.
That's a good clip.
So going back to the part of what spawned this idea is all this court action around crypto stuff.
Okay.
The other thing that you came in and recorded with Lee this week, and I think you brought out a legal expert to talk a little bit more about it, was the Uniswap case.
Yes.
Now there was 4 points that I saw on a thread on Twitter that really made me interested in the outcomes here, and you can speak to the larger conversation that
Okay.
you had. The court was happy to, and actually says that courts should draw a distinction between a protocol and an interface to a protocol,
Okay.
which is a big thing for DeFi.
Mm-hmm.
Court says they decline to stretch elements of securities law and say that's for Congress to figure out. The court says it finds it difficult to see how a drafter of computer code could be held liable for misuse of code created by a platform in a third party. And they said it's the first court analysis of an AMM, or a decentralized exchange, that says that a liquidity provider does not lose legal title by providing liquidity to an AMM pool, which is really technical, but we can get into that if you want.
Yeah. So you just touched on a lot of great things.
Yeah.
And for context for our viewers, so Uniswap, which is a decentralized protocol allowing people to it's a decentralized exchange. People can trade cryptocurrencies of all kinds and create tokens, sell tokens, etc. And basically what happened is the court that was seeing this case dropped it due to the fact that the decentralized protocol cannot be held liable for what their users are doing, because again, it is decentralized. And so they can't really control if a user goes onto the platform, creates a scam token, and then scams a bunch of people. And that was their whole argument, is that the courts shouldn't be coming against them. They should be coming against the people who are releasing these scam tokens. And I'm just going to give you guys the analogy that the judge used within the documents. And she said that just as you wouldn't hold Venmo liable for a shady deal someone made using its services, you can't blame Uniswap for how users chose to navigate the platform. So the lawsuit is dismissed, and honestly, this was a big win for the crypto industry, and I would say, for humankind, because basically it allows us to have decentralized tools in the world, and the people who created those tools are not held liable for how those tools are used. And I think this is a big problem within crypto right now, is that somebody could start a very useful tool that could maybe be used in a really shady way, because there are a lot of shady actors in the world, and that tool is being held liable, which stops innovation and also moves that innovation elsewhere. So this was a big win for the industry and for human civilization.
Yes, there we go. Well, I mean, so here's where I see some implications, and maybe you can. I don't know if I haven't reviewed the conversation you guys had on the podcast with TBC this week, but maybe you guys covered this. The court finding it difficult. Let's see, which one is it? Finding it difficult to see how a drafter of computer code could be held liable for the misuse of that code platform by a third party.
Yeah.
Seems to have direct implications for the Tornado Cash case, which I think we didn't discuss last week because we had kind of a special episode. We were talking about social media, but two more of the co-founders of the Tornado Cash smart contract, or two of the developers, were arrested in the United States a couple weeks ago and charged with billions of dollars of money laundering. Because
platform.
because the way the DOJ was interpreting no difference between the front end and the code itself.
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing is, like, the law is still catching up, right? These digital assets are clearly reshaping the financial world and more worlds, but the laws right now, the regulation is so out of date, and the regulators are incapable of keeping up with the speed of the innovation. So this is why we're seeing all these cases come up.
Yeah, well, for sure. That and Gensler can't stop suing people, because I thought the most interesting thing was on this, the judge that made this decision, that wrote these very nuanced opinions, is the same judge hearing the Coinbase SEC
Yes,
case.
it is. And I think the judges are getting frustrated at this point because the law is clearly overreaching.
Yeah.
And as bad as our court systems are and the law in the US, in the US country, I'm butchering that, but this was a big win for democracy too, because it really established, it's setting a tone for decentralized applications, and it's allowing for people to innovate and have the freedom to innovate. And from my understanding, code is speech.
That's
So
been a
if
Supreme Court
code is
decision,
speech,
yeah.
and this country believes in free speech, then anyone should be able to code. And that's the whole thing that the judge was bringing up.
Right.
I agree with you. I think it's a big win, because it's what happens. Like when you look at the firearm manufacturers and insurance, they want to have to go to the manufacturer. It has nothing to do with they actually believe that the creation of the gun is what caused the problem. It's just they just want to stop it, and it's what you're using the courts to go after people to shut something down because you're losing in the court of public opinion. You can't get Congress to do what you want, so you try to cheat in another way. And this is a great example of that, where the exchange, lots of bad things happen because that's what happens in a free market. But you cannot blame that person. It would be like blaming someone at a Wendy's because somebody came and got in a fight. So you have to shut down all the Wendy's now? That's a ridiculous statement. It's exactly what was going on with Uniswap. It's the same kind of thing,
Right.
which is they're not even trying to pretend it's anything but broad-based. I'm shutting you down because I don't like what's
Sure.
happening. So it's
And-
great that the judges backed off and said, no, this is
It's
not right.
actually like it's going back to another conversation we had with Stram and Jen when we were talking about the short-term rental conversation, where they're talking about Airbnb causing an increase in crime, which Stram Josh Stramiello likened to saying, oh well, there's an increase in crime because you have Walmarts where all these criminal incidents happen. Well, there's just a lot of Walmarts, right? That's what happens when you get
I'm a little
people.
shocked we didn't go with Waffle House. I wish I'd said, can I change my remarks to go from Wendy's to Waffle House? I think that would have been better.
Right.
Okay, just in your head, remember it as Waffle
Yeah,
House.
just-
We'll do it that way.
That's a good point though. Like with anything in crypto, people just blame crypto as a
Right.
whole for all these bad things happening, but it's not
My
because
wallet was hacked. You mean your exchange? Because it's not the same thing.
right,
Yeah.
right. That's the problem, is the misunderstanding of crypto and the infrastructure and the systems in place right now. Is, as big of a win that this is, there's still a lot of room for growth. There's still a lot of things we need to figure out, because now that this happened, well, how do we address it? These bad actors are still playing, so we know that the regulators are going to come after them. So what is the actual solution? Because it's clearly we're not going after the exchanges anymore.
I mean, honestly, if we really believe that decentralization is the answer and the way forward with society, then we've got to come up with mechanisms within the market that solve the problem. We can't rely on regulators. We can't rely on the law. The law is just now, this is the reason why we're even talking about this is because this is the first time a judge has issued a sensible
Right.
opinion about crypto. This is not a sustainable system to police ourselves with. So we've got to figure out a better way to do it outside of governmental control.
Well, that's an interesting point, because how will crypto be regulated outside of governmental control? You talk about decentralization, and I think a lot of people want that. But of course, these centralized powers like the government would never want that. So they're still going to.
So yeah, absolutely, dude. So Michael Llewellyn, who we know is on the board of your organization, we should be relying on organizations like the one he belongs to, Open Zeppelin. They need to take a more they're a for-profit organization that does code auditing, but Open Zeppelin is perfectly positioned to start acting as a policeman for the space. They audit everybody's code, and code that they make recommendations for that should be fixed, or that should be, I don't know if I should speak out of turn of this or not, but like he's talked to me in situations where they've made recommendations like this code is vulnerable in these ways, and for whatever reason they still go forward with the project and don't necessarily take all their recommendations, in some cases which creates open exploits, which creates a honeypot for bad actors and criminals, right?
But that's human nature. We will always have that aspect in anything.
Right, but like they need to think about their role in the ecosystem. They're
Right.
an early warning system. They're positioned to be some form of a policeman, right? Or some form of a regulatory body.
But what happens in the case where exactly what you described, they can police it and they can make those recommendations, but it doesn't mean those recommendations will always be followed.
It's more about talking about it, though. The very fact that it's
For sure,
something to
for sure.
begin to discuss. What is our role? What is the ecosystem? It's not just crypto make some money. It's not decentralization and then boom, the magic happens. It's more, how do we start putting adults into the room? How do we have mature actors in place? When someone starts talking about Lambos, how do you cut them out and say, you're just done? We're not talking to you people anymore. Once it starts actually working together, and you're seeing some of this with the growth of blockchain everywhere, but it's,
you know, like to your point, I was thinking about this yesterday, like what will the next bull market look like? And I'm very excited for it because I do think it's going to be a lot more developed than the industry has ever been. And we are still in the infant stage of this industry. And I think that there will be a world in 10, 20 years where this is just standardized practice, right? Like blockchain, decentralization, cryptocurrencies. I think this will be a thing of the past where now we have something bigger than blockchain, you know?
Right.
So I do envision a world where this is, you know, running everything, and all the big governments, the big institutions, everybody in the world is going to be affected by this. There's no doubt.
should we tell them when the next bull run is? Should we share the secret?
Yeah.
I mean,
why not?
As
Tomorrow.
soon as I sell.
Okay.
That's
All right. You're going to dump
That's
on all of us.
historically when
counter trade Jim is
in inverse Kramer.
I'm the Jim Cramer of the crypto world.
right.
Yeah.
The second
Well,
I
so-
sell, it goes through the roof.
Right.
Unfortunately, that happens to too many of us.
So I want to skip the X discussion and talk about this McKinsey report a little bit, and if we have time, we can come back to X. Because
First, I want to know something.
yes,
Does anyone here speak French?
no,
No.
I don't.
No, I
'Cause
speak Russian.
I got something this morning, and it's ruined AI for me.
Oh,
Give
okay.
it to us.
Do you know how to pronounce Chat GPT in French?
Does your piss
No.
Chat GPT.
shot? Je pit.
It means cat I fart. So French people all over the world are seeing
Dang.
ChatGPT and they're just giggling every time that we bring it up. And now I'm worried that I am too.
Well,
could it be?
the French have had a rough year. Well, I'm going to give them this one.
They need a
They
win this
They
year.
need a win.
Yeah, they're going through it.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny. They're going to be laughing at us in a couple of years, saying we're going through it.
Yeah.
Chat GPT.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna start doing that on
I
stage.
wonder what that is.
Yeah.
in
and then
Russian.
just laughing for 5 minutes.
The one French person in the back's going to be like knowing what you're talking about. So so this McKinsey. So tell me about this McKinsey report. We talked a little bit about it before, but I want to like explore it fully and then talk about this response to it, because it's about measuring developer productivity, right?
Right. There's a Substack called the Pragmatic Engineer, and apparently McKinsey came out with a model that allows you to track engineer productivity. And it's just numbers. Basically, how much code you write, how much you're pushing, what kind of bugs and stuff like that. So it's just a basic model that purports to tell you how well an engineer is doing. And this Pragmatic Engineer doesn't like that. And the reason why it makes sense, they start walking through the different choices, is one, most of human endeavor, we talk about measuring it from a business standpoint. And you have to have things to measure. You have your KPIs and your OKRs in the business world. So you have to know how you're winning, you're selling and closing and money and cash flow, all those things define how well that you're doing. However, we kind of leave the magic out of it every once in a while. So we talked about this years ago about you never really know what causes people to be incredible. Like, what is the chemistry of a team? So the one we used was you have four developers, right? 3 of them are awesome and 1 is just terrible. But that 4th developer, we'll call him Mark. No relation to you. We'll
Okay.
call him Jimmy. We'll call him Jimmy because Jimmy's not a developer. Jimmy's not a great coder, but he's a great dude. He's funny. Everybody laughs. And so the other 3 developers, because they like Jimmy and they hang out with him, work harder and cover his mistakes. So the overall production of the team is much better. You go through and you measure those 4 people and it makes it obvious you cut Jimmy. While the other 3 developers don't spend as much time there, the overall production falls. So there's little things like that happen all the time. You've got a receptionist in the front, and one of her jobs is to make sure that food's ordered on Fridays. Well, you cut down a little bit, you cut that job, it's no longer there, you turn it to automated phones, and well, now food's not being sent and ordered and prepared, so people don't spend time, and it's in those little moments at work that people figured out something amazing. So we don't understand why things are successful. It's like, what makes a viral video? Well, you know the conditions, but really makes it driving. The idea that McKinsey is trying to tell you how good a developer is makes a lot of sense from their standpoint, because as they point out in the Substack, who wants to measure that progress? On your own, you want to measure it to get better. And the CTO wants to measure it because they want to cut the bottom 10%, which is something they've been doing for 40 years. Jack Welch that was a big thing. And now Amazon. So the problem is once you get to that point where you're measuring people and you're cutting the lower, bottom 10%, people start playing games. All of a sudden, those exceeds expectations are hitting your marks. They game the system and they lose that very productivity that you're looking for because they have learned how to game the system. And now you have to, because you don't want to get cut. So it's kind of like, and they were talking about salespeople. You judge a salesperson by how many phone calls they made or how many contacts. But the dirty secret is that the best salespeople have the worst numbers. And the real question is, we always benchmark our best salespeople, but it's not seeing how well that person did. It's comparing what that person did to your worst salesperson. It's the difference in what they're doing. It's not an absolute number. So if you decide I made 100 phone calls today and that's good for you, that's great. But the worst person could be doing that too. Maybe they're just bad at the pitch.
So what's the point of measuring these things if there's so many nuances around it and it doesn't really give you the full picture?
It feels like you're doing a good job and now you have something to share. I mean, that's a lot of what it is executives. The world is truly complex. It's like the economy. It's hard to figure out the economy. Yeah. Economists are always predicting 10 of the last 3 recessions, right? It's difficult to figure those things out when humans are involved. And so we fall back on this with sociology or HR building blocks. We try to measure stuff so we feel we have some sense of control.
Well, I mean, I feel like this is I'm assuming these are only applicable in large engineering organizations, like this whole thing, because if you've got a small company or a small business or a small startup, like the metric is really easy. Does the code work or not? Right. So if you've got like a large, and I'm assuming this is probably targeted at non-technical organizations is what that have an engineering.
Whoever will pay McKinsey to do so is my guess.
Right. Well, I mean, Google's not paying McKinsey to do that stuff because Google prides itself on being able to figure that out internally as a engineering focused organization, I'm assuming. So
yes,
this is probably like
maybe
like a Hilton or like a JP Morgan or something like that. Some large Fortune 100 company that has engineering chops, right? Is the sweet spot for this. What I would say, or maybe like a Twitter where a new CEO comes in and has to have a metric for firing 70% of the workforce. In these situations where you've got a large product and a ton of engineers devoted to it, and basically each department of engineers and developers are working on features of the same product, this seems like a problem for AI to solve. Specifically because AI has gotten really good at analyzing code, like better than any human could possibly be.
You know what AI isn't good at though? Doing these nuanced things that is just kind of natural from the human being. And a lot of that stuff comes from the human brain.
But it can tell you when the code works and when it doesn't work, and it can tell you exactly why it doesn't work, and it can analyze commit histories as well.
Mark's talking more about things like the cognitive tools as opposed to like the
I'm
generative.
talking about more of what
it's
you were
not the
talking
LLM
about.
stuff. Yeah, it's totally different.
Well, I'm talking, what came to mind when he mentioned it was like, these are the type of things that we can't train AI models to do yet. Because
but we can. I mean, for this particular application, like this is exactly what an AI or an LLM or even LLM or a cognitive tool can do. Like this is
what it can't do is make the decision. So that's the big problem with almost all sociology. I call it the Malcolm Gladwell problem. Gladwell is great at research and having really interesting people, and he's a great writer. When he starts using that to make decisions, he goes off the rails. And a lot of people do. They're like, "Oh, I'm an outlier. Or I'm a connector." And they have these cool words from the tipping point, and they don't realize that. Yeah, you're just looking back. We're good at looking backwards. Right. This is true for all social network analysis. We got really excited 20 years ago when we realized you could track what people are doing. This is the bottleneck. Here's the person. Wow, we can actually build a company based on great social science. We can't. We can look back and say, this is why that worked.
Yeah.
We can't recreate it moving up into the future. And so this is the same thing. You can look at cognitive tools can look at every bit of work you've done and say, this is why it worked. The mistake is then when you ask well, the person using that report, or if you ask AI to make recommendations, that's what'll fall apart. But we very clearly know what works and doesn't.
Like especially for engineering.
Yeah.
I wouldn't presume to say that it could do the same thing for a sales organization.
I think
or
it's sales
marketing
and
organization.
absolutely. I think it could.
You think so?
Yeah, we don't have. I mean, our metrics aren't that
Well,
complicated.
but what I was saying, like with engineering and a coding focused organization, it's perfectly instrumented. Like your code,
Right,
every line of code you ever have written is a historical database, and you can analyze that step by step, and you know who did what, right? So you can see who, which departments and which features aren't even necessary anymore. What's feature complete, what's
Yeah,
not.
the sales too. You look at the size of the company, who they're talking to,
Right.
where they got in.
I guess
you
with
worked
like a
them
good
before,
CRM
you're
or
looking at the
something.
invoices. If you have enough of the right data points, and it's something that humans can't do. I can't figure out everything that Frank does to sell to this company. But if you do it with enough salespeople, you absolutely can figure out this is our actual ideal client. In fact, this is what not AI, but just automation did. The solo cut people.
But we need a different name for it than a KPI, because it's not a performance indicator.
Oh, yeah.
It's looking at your totally instrumented activity, right? Like as an engineer,
Oh,
as
your
a salesperson. There you go.
There you go.
Right.
Copyright that.
So, but like it's not like looking for an arbitrary number, like number of calls you've done or how many lines of code you've written. It's just like, it's looking at the total work product and saying this accomplished the goal.
Yeah, I mean, looking back, you think of the power of that. The question is how would you use it? And the answer is they're using it to cut people or look for productivity gains or
right,
yeah,
or cross training. Like, hey, Jimmy the coder is doing these things that get the job done. Everybody else should be more like Jimmy. Why aren't you more like your brother?
Well, he's a people person,
right?
He has important skills.
There you go. Right.
Chat GPT.
That's what you should say when it just goes silent.
Yep.
Oh my
Okay.
goodness.
Hang in this. All right. So does that kind of conclude the lineup of things?
I mean, unless you want to go over time just to talk
I
about
do.
the Elon's eyeball scanning that he's going to be doing or whatever.
Yeah.
We've got 15 minutes.
Okay.
We started 15 late, so
Let's
right.
do it. Let's talk about something fun.
So you sent this to me, and there was a lot of ink spilled on other Twitter developments this week, but the one aspect that caught your attention was the fact that they're using biometrics for identity, or planning on using biometrics
Right.
for identity.
So our pitch before, when people said, well, what is that? Well, what is the point of X? What is Elon trying to do? The whole jobs thing, they put a jobs up. Now they're matching that. And he had some comment on Twitter that he hates it when someone sends him a LinkedIn profile because it's just garbage and they're going to do a better job, which does actually make sense. I mean, LinkedIn is user generated content. So a lot of it is going to be nonsense. What if you had a wizard that said, these are the things that people actually care about? And that makes more sense for a microblogging system. But if he's adding that, your business profile, your habits, your spending money on X, then they're trying to do the biofeedback. It goes back to that pitch about verification we talked about. I think that's a huge mistake, is asking for those ready available bio things, because that makes me not want to do it at all. And it misses the whole point. We had a verification over time is the only way to truly know what somebody's doing. So
Right.
That's a little, I get why. I think that's a rush when someone starts saying they want to do that, like the eyeball scan
Yeah.
from what's his face.
WorldCoin, Sam Altman.
You're just like,
So-
yeah, you're not able to do it fast enough, and so you're trying to jump it by nailing that verification piece.
My
And-
problem with these things are like who makes the I'm butchering this. Who makes the recommendations, or the like who decides, oh, this person is a good person, that person is a bad person? I think that's where the problem lies with
It's
any of
terrifying.
these systems.
I mean, unless it's me, it's terrifying.
Right?
Well, I'm a good guy, so I'll be fair.
We all are. Not this one.
The first thing that I'm doing, by the way, is these trainers in the gyms who go out in the open floor and they have these stupid programs and play terrible dubstep and bad rap at like maximum volume. If you can't motivate people, I'm serious. Those people are getting the axe. The first thing when
Right.
I'm king
First
is those
against
gym
the wall.
trainers. I'm gonna destroy their boom boxes, and I'm just gonna wreck it, and then they're all going straight to jail.
Maybe we'll just have AI gym trainers. Once the Tesla robot comes out, we'll just program
We
it.
probably will. I mean, who says we're not? You think Peloton actually sells live coaches?
No.
Why wouldn't they have avatars doing it?
What do you guys think? Do you think we will ever live in a Ready Player One world?
Oh, that would be cool.
That would be cool.
Yeah.
Well,
What?
as long as it's not the problem with Ready Player
Well, I
One
mean-
is it was centralized.
It was centralized, but what is cool about a world that is absolutely
Well, I
dog?
assume I'm the main character on stage, so that's pretty cool.
You're already the main character. You don't need Ready Player One.
Yeah.
But I have like augmented stuff that I'm okay with.
Yeah, see, it's a little scary to think about that, where your outside world is absolute chaos, but you can put on a pair of goggles and live in some sort of fantasy. I will never buy into
That's
that
a
idea.
very bad thing. Yeah.
Have you
Yeah.
seen the news?
Yeah.
I think we're already there.
That's funny.
We
Yeah.
come into this studio and we talk about things. And
And we walk out there and the world's blowing up.
Yeah, this is the nicest it looks in like a 5-block radius.
Yeah.
Like you go outside, it's warehouses and stuff out
Yeah.
there. It's not like a pristine
I live in a nice place. It's quiet.
Neotopia.
We have
Yeah.
trees, old trees,
No,
Granted, we're also in the United States, so it's
Yeah.
very nice compared to some other places.
and we're in Texas. So
Right.
And
there's
we're in
that.
Texas. Everything's better.
And we
in
had that
Texas.
cold front come through, so it's only 99.
Hey, I'm going to California tomorrow. Okay.
I was just there. It's not great.
So-
I know.
Jen says it's the damn STRs.
yeah, short-term rentals. That's what it is.
Short-term rentals.
Short-term rentals.
Oh, yeah, the Airbnb.
You know, I was
Oh,
thinking
yeah.
yesterday. Now that we're talking about Airbnbs, I'm going on a tangent. But like, can you imagine like a city where everyone lives in an apartment,
Like Wuhan.
like New York,
Like
New York.
every
like
city.
literally no. But like, think about New York. Like, kids grow up in
I know.
apartments,
I
and then
can't imagine.
adults live in apartments. Their entire life and understanding of life has been within an apartment. Where you can go to some place like Los Angeles, go live in a
Yeah.
beautiful mansion in the hills for a couple $1 million, and you have this incredible mansion to yourself, to 1 to 2 people.
Or you live 14 to a house because you wanted to live close to the beach and you can't afford to do more because you're literally living 14 to a house.
It's kind of
Are
crazy to
sharing
think
a-
about.
Studio between 3 people.
Now, how does that change if you have VR?
You live like Bender the robot in Futurama in a little
It's
closet.
like you have bunk beds, but
Yeah.
in
Oh my
reality,
God.
you're doing other things.
I mean, that's the whole point of the tiny spaces and the 15-minute city.
yeah.
Yeah, you end up a less person. You vote for more socialist, basically.
Do we live in the Matrix?
No, probably not. Maybe. Probably not. Though.
What does history say?
Well, history would tell you that this idea has been around for a long time, and it goes back not just to Plato's cave, but Nietzsche and the spider. So it's more literature than history, because
Mm.
if the Matrix was real, then history would be made up. So
Yeah, it's just lore. History is only lore now.
that's a made up name. All names are made up.
Right.
It's not. It's more a philosophy than something else.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And it goes back to nihilism. If you're in the Matrix, you don't control anything. Nothing matters, and nothing you do. Why wouldn't you just take heroin and just?
But why can't that be the
Purge.
case?
Because life's more than that.
Is it?
Yeah.
Tell me why.
Life is
how?
beauty. Life is music. If you want to, what is it? If you don't want life to pass you by, listen to music. And then there's some lyrics, something like that.
I
My
listen
dad
to a
says
lot
all
of
the
music.
time.
I feel
I
like.
can make some music on LimeWire, but I don't know if you'd
Oh
say
my
that's
God,
like
LimeWire. How old are you?
Have you ever heard of that?
Have I heard of LimeWire?
Yeah,
Do you know what LimeWire? Do you know what your?
I know what.
This is worse
Hey,
than
hey,
Reddit.
I know Frostbite. Do you know Frostbite? Do you know Frostbite? Forget
FrostWire,
LimeWire.
FrostWire.
Frost.
Yeah.
Jesus, we're gonna need to cut that off.
So yeah. So
Butcher that.
LimeWire, this is actually the buzz around the office this week and around some parts of the internet. LimeWire is back.
you hear
They're
them laughing at
we
us
can
in there?
actually hear them laughing in the other.
Yeah, LimeWire is back. We all got
Really?
LimeWire accounts. Yeah.
Pause. LimeWire is not back. It's a completely new LimeWire.
Wow.
Somebody bought. It's a new LimeWire. So basically, LimeWire has come back to the surface as a new platform for NFTs and generated AI generated content, whether it's music, videos, or images. And the very interesting part is has no association to the original LimeWire.
Other than the logo looks pretty much the same and it's the same domain name.
Yeah.
So somebody let.
So it's not a place to download bad music files.
no,
with
you
viruses.
still can.
Oh, you can still get bad music with
Yeah, yeah.
viruses.
Well, I mean, it depends on your opinion of music because you got who
Oh,
Dead
Bad Baby
Mouse.
has some heaters on there.
the baby.
Bad,
uh,
bad Baby, not
Bad-
Da Baby.
the
Bad
best
Baby.
thing about
Bad
the old
Baby.
LimeWire was how many people didn't know who sang a song. So
Dead
you'd be like,
Mouse.
"Oh yeah, this is Michael Jackson doing a country song," and like,
it was
Friends of-
everything.
It says it's Michael Jackson,
Yeah.
but once you
Yeah,
turn it on, it
so-
definitely ain't Michael
Everything was
Jackson.
Darude Sandstorm.
Yeah. No, it's
Yeah.
actually funny, like because I was using FrostWire, whatever, Frostbite, whatever it is, before LimeWire, and I remember
Wow.
it,
It does look the same.
right?
Oh,
Just booted images.
that's crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
And there's a token, of course.
No, whoever's behind this is.
Oh,
is-
this sucks. I can only see my last 10 creations.
Yeah, until you because you have to.
Oh no,
if
I'm
you upgrade your
upgrading.
account, you can see more of your history.
Yeah.
I got to see the Mickey Mouse. That's-
upgrade your account, dude. It's capitalism.
But it's a Web3 platform. You can hook in your Web3 wallet to it and export stuff. It mints things on the Polygon
Blockchain.
blockchain by default. You can, and of course, you can bridge stuff off Polygon to any of the other Ethereum blockchains that way.
I mean, really smart on the people behind this to use the same name, to use the same
Right.
logo.
You can buy NFTs with a credit card. This is one of the right. Like you don't like it by default. It doesn't give you the Web3 interface by default.
Hey,
it
do you want
gives
to play a
the,
game of good decision, bad decision?
what's that?
No. No. Wait, really quick on this point about buying NFTs with credit cards and onboarding people super easily. I was having a conversation today with the Bitcoin person, expert Bitcoin user,
Mhm.
who had to send some Bitcoin from one address to the next address, and they were having a really hard time with it. And this is an expert in Bitcoin. Now, can you imagine we are living in 2023 and an expert in Bitcoin is having a hard time interacting with it? Now, imagine the normal person who has never even touched cryptocurrency. I mean, this is how early we still are.
Yeah. Not to dox this person, but like how,
don't dox.
I don't know who they are.
Please not
Who's the expert? I mean, like how do you know that they're an expert?
I work with them every day.
Okay. All right. Then.
I basically just dox them, but
yeah. Bleep that out or something.
um,
But yeah, no. Like yeah, okay. Yeah. There's different levels of expertise.
I
though.
agree, I
Yeah,
agree.
Like there's someone that understands like the policy implications of
Yeah.
of cryptocurrency, and then if you don't use
they
the
are an
tools-
avid user, to be clear.
Well, but like there's different ways to use it, right? And this is the problem with a lot of Bitcoiners is they use it as a savings mechanism, which
For
means
sure.
they don't use it for transactions, which means they don't understand entire sets of the features.
Well, Mark, if you forgot, you are the smartest person here. So
no,
pull the brakes a little bit.
no, I'm just saying like there's lots of ways. It's like
Do we agree on
I
that?
agree. Do we agree on that?
Yeah.
Oh, I shouldn't have said that in front of him.
yeah.
No, I'm not
but-
saying it's right or wrong. I just want to make sure. I mean, what's the criteria behind this?
Yeah,
Well,
That's for another show.
yeah.
but there's different ways. This is why I just recorded something on Bitcoin maximalism yesterday that hopefully comes out here in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah.
But like the thing that I reiterated several times on that is you cannot call yourself a true expert in Bitcoin and crypto unless you're avidly using the tools. And if you're sticking only to Bitcoin and the primary use cases for
Mm.
Bitcoin, you're only going to be using a minor subset of the features.
Mhm.
And it's very difficult to really get your arms around what all is capable
Mm.
of how it's going to change the world and how it can be useful to you.
Mm.
So
Yeah, it's crazy to think that like you can use this stuff every day and still have challenges with it.
right.
You know?
Well, but like it's just no different from normal banking though. Like look at you use a bank account every single day, but do you know how to do an international wire?
no.
Right. Well, because that's not part of your daily routine.
What about our good friend who's never sent something by the post office or UPS and didn't know how to do it, despite being an accomplished corporate professional? You don't know how to go to the post office?
I do. But like if I had to send like an envelope of
letter?
just
If I had
letter,
to send a mail,
Jen this
See, I've
morning was
never
telling
been-
me how he doesn't know how to write a check.
did everything
my
shut
God.
I
off?
still have no idea.
all right. I had this instance happen to me like a month ago. I know how to write a check now, but
Yeah.
it's kind of crazy to think about this gap. Like that is 100% because of technology. Like I'm saying that I will die on that hill. Like
Sure.
because technology has enabled me to send money so easily. I've never used a check before, you know,
Right. But you use bank accounts every day
and it's still
and you don't and Jen, I'm assuming, uses his bank account on a regular at least a weekly basis, and he still doesn't know how to write
Hopefully.
a check. So I mean, it doesn't puzzle me that someone who's a Bitcoin expert can have problems sending Bitcoin just because of the same exact reason.
agreed. But the difference is my experience using the bank is much simpler than my experience using Bitcoin or cryptocurrency.
Well, except to put
Mark
more,
isn't.
to put more
He's- yeah.
to put more
Yeah.
bean on the bone. Jen was talking. The reason why we're talking about this is because his you can just go to technical difficulties. You don't want me to talk about your rent situation. He's got a $50 service fee that he has to pay every month to pay his rent.
Oh, I pay like triple that. Mine is like
Your
140.
service fee?
I
But
have a cam fee now that they decided to put in the lease.
Right.
As of this
Understand
year.
how the service fees are supposed to work. So Mark suggested that I go to the actual apartment complex and pay
For the
with
check.
the check.
Oh, they
That's where
hate
this
that. They won't
conversation
take
started.
that anymore. Yeah.
Right. Right. As opposed to paying the service fee, the convenience fee.
Oh, the
for-
service fee for using a credit card.
Right.
Oh yeah, everybody has that though.
Yeah, well, if you pay with a check, right? Are they going to give you that service fee? I mean, because what's the service fee actually for, right? You can,
Nothing.
there's a law that says like if you pay with like cash, legal tender, or a check, that you can't like charge them extra for accepting that. Whereas with credit card processing and other things, there's
with anything else.
yeah, they can do whatever they want. So that's what I'm saying. Like, well, is it worth $50? He's got what I'm saying is he's got a financial incentive to learn the new technology feature of writing a check.
Wow, new technology features, writing a check.
Or doing a wire is free.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wrote checks for all my rents.
So anyway,
How many rents do you have? And is that like
Past
colloquial
tense.
for your parents? Is that still something
Past-
that you guys do, or is that
past
the
tense.
rents?
past rents.
Rents.
You've never heard the
PA
parents?
rents
No,
or
maybe
past
that
rents.
was 20 years ago. Maybe that was
Am I
my
that
sister.
young?
We are
It
really
might be, yeah.
we're really far afield now.
No. All right.
Cool. Well, it's been a great roundtable. Any closing thoughts you guys want to bring to the table before we go?
Follow me at web3_ready on Twitter.
Chat GPT.
There we go. And just click the like and subscribe button on wherever you're watching this. That's all I got to say. Hey, thanks for watching The Merge. We've got a ton more stuff for you to watch on YouTube, on Instagram, on TikTok, everywhere. Check us out.